Perfect timing. Literally hit the go live button. Somebody rings the doorbell and the dogs go crazy. Well, guys, we're going to try to get real fancy tonight. Episode 2. I think I'm live on... We'll get this locked down by next week. And the dogs will stop barking at some point. I believe we're live on YouTube now. I'm going to wait for someone to say something in the chat, make sure things actually working. Although I'm sure Jesse would have called me at this point to yell at me, so we'll see. Jesse, you should go in the chat and say something. See, I see comments. Let me see this. If I hit test, then can I display it? Oh, yeah, show. There we go. Jesse, I'm doing the thing. You're live, but you can see the comments. I can, in fact, see the comments, and so can you, because I hit show. So, there you go. Cool. Well, we'll just go off and we'll just get rolling here then. I love that Hannah has to go in and out of the door right now with the dogs, though. Babe, you've had all day to do this. For God's sakes. We'll start in just a sec. I don't think anybody's overly anxious about this. You know what you can't see, though, Jesse, is the viewer count. Oh, there it is up in the corner. All right. It's honestly, Alan, the dogs could easily be let down. And it would be fine. All right, episode 2, couple hobby topics I want to talk about. I actually made some notes for the show. I'm going to try to take this thing seriously, despite the train wreck with the dogs and everything else going wrong. But I can show comments on screen, Jesse. You want to see it? Boom, roasted. You can see that, correct, Jesse? And I removed it. Once you give me the thumbs up there, we're just going to go. We're not going to have any more questions about it. Things are going to be an adventure, and I'm excited. What's up, Benny B? Bryson, welcome in. All right, we're good to go. So 3 quick card notes I did want to talk about, then a couple topics I was going to hit on real quick. First of all, Bowman and Shepherd University, we ripped our last case today, last 2 cases. Absolutely insane looking product. I know people don't care a whole lot about it anymore. Kind of lost its luster. The Anthony Richardson was absolutely disgusting. I would still argue aesthetically the best looking card set known to mankind. Top Sapphire, Bowman Sapphire. It's awesome. The Bobby Witt rookie I picked up this week. Bobby Witt stuff is crazy cheap, which is awesome. And then one other thing, and this actually will be kind of just a quick first topic. Expired redemptions. That's the Lou Bob out of 2020. Obviously, it's been expired for a while. It is amazing how many products are crazy heavy with redemptions. And honestly, 2018 Bowman might be the worst example, the best bad example of it. Lou Bob First Prospect auto stuff is huge, all expired. Even 2020 now, we're coming up on that being, obviously that's expired, 2021. There's a lot of that stuff now too. And football might be the most brutally hit by that. Like Burrow, Herbert, like Burrow especially was almost always a redemption. Fields was a redemption almost all of last year. I do think it would be nice if there, and maybe there is a resource out there, I just don't know about it, but it's amazing to me there's not like a good resource to just say, hey, here's 2021 contenders, and these are the redemptions in it, because I think that would massively affect the value of some of this sealed product. Like years later, even like 2017, that's when I got the worst dose of it. We ripped 2017 Cornerstones basketball, and it had just expired, so that's why the price was so cheap. We hit Kobe and Tatum. Kobe at that point obviously wasn't signing after the helicopter, and even Tatum, like Tatum stuff is expired. So, anyways, that was my little rant about redemptions. The other topic I wanted to get into was buying. I know right now the market is super down, very slow in a lot of respects. Even eBay guys, some of the consigners saying the same thing. Like we're seeing less bid activity, less watchers. Things are still moving, but the market is having an effect on things. Like there's no question about it. Like we are in a down market. It's not been 2-3 years of this. Like a year and a half ago, things were actually still very good. But for the last year or so, consistently, despite accolades and good things happening, things have been super slow. And so, sometimes it's just this mindset now of like, well, you can't do anything. You got to be super cautious on what to buy. You have to be cautious what to buy no matter what the market is like, now more than ever. But I would say I actually have spent more money in the last 8 to 10 days than any other time in the last, I would say, honestly, probably the last year and a half. It seems like people are super motivated to sell stuff, which is great. This time leading up to nationals is just a super slow time. Like guys are not listing a ton of stuff on eBay. I had this conversation with a big customer of mine today who does a ton of consignment. Like if you're going to consign on eBay, this is about the last week to get stuff to a consigner, especially if they're a week out. After that, you're going to be competing with the national, which you don't want to do. People can tell you as much as they want how the show is not this necessary thing. You don't have to go there, whatever. But it has a major effect on resale of things. Markets just get super, super slow the week I really think 2 weeks leading up to the national. So right now to me is honestly a perfect time. If you have expendable money, like you don't need to buy this stuff and flip it in a week. If you can, that's great. But I think you can actually find some really good deals right now. People seem super motivated to sell. Last year at this time, leading up to the national, the whole narrative and the thought was, and it was correct, but it was like, man, you can't do anything right now. You can't buy anything because people have taken such a hit on their cards that all of a sudden nothing is moving for people. Like they're just caught up on 2021 pricing, so pricing is just absurd. You're not going to buy it. I think people who still have cardboard at this point are over that. Guys are onto the fact now that like, hey, this is kind of where we're at with it. Like we know what the market is. We know things have slowed down. And so we're willing to sell based on recent and real comps, which I think is a huge. So again, I think it's actually for the first time in a while, I've been buying quite a bit more than I have been, in recent history for sure. So that was my first thing. The other thing I want to talk about was there were 3. I've actually been trying to take in more YouTube just because there's a lot of guys who do that. You can tell the train wreck that this is. And it will continue to be that way, just to be clear. I'm never going to be comfortable on camera, but we're going to really try to push to do more of it. I did want to kind of give a shout. I'm going to try to be much more specific here than I am on the podcast with things, just because this is the place to do it. And quite frankly, these guys all YouTube much better than me. So first off was Neo Cards and Comics. I was chatting with him in PM Instagram Messenger the other day. He puts out a ton of messages, by the way, which are videos. I mean, I don't know how he finds the time to do it. I'm trying to do 2 a week, and I'm miserable. But he was kind of talking about like ground shifting things. And honestly, I kind of summarized the video and probably missummarized it to a degree. The ripple effect. So this is kind of stealing off what Neo was saying. It is interesting because when you're in a small community like we are in the cardboard world, like a lot of this stuff has an effect. Everything is still connected. Now I get the rap for being a breaker, which that's how I made my money and that's how I made my name in the hobby. Obviously, it was a breaker at first, started in 2016. So breaking has become the villain in the room. And quite frankly, a lot of it is earned. There's a lot of just useless garbage breakers. They're terrible with pricing. They put in no effort. And I'm not even talking, by the way, about the young guys who are shirtless and screaming and acting like maniacs. That's not my style. But obviously, a ton of people like that. I don't care about that. I'm not talking about stylistic differences, though. But breakers, by and large, have earned the bad name that they've gotten. And the few of us, and I include myself, that I feel like are good quality breakers, we foster the community, we've done a good job with it, we take a little bit of a reputation hit just because of the word breaker. It's become this stupid term that people hate, and that's fine. I will say, though, that to me is one of the most, and again, back to the Neo point, like the ripple effect. Like everybody wants to get rid of breakers, and man, it would just be great to be back in the old days. I think pricing across the board would really suffer. And by the way, again, there's no secrets here. I still break now, much less than I have in the past. Content's become our main game. But you take away these things, and Neo talked about this point too, specifically, not even just ripping wax, repacks. I think almost everybody in the hobby who is not a part of repacks, in other words, not buying to put them together and not selling them, just super. That might be the most underestimated, underappreciated sector, I guess. I don't know what the word is, of the hobby. The amount of massive, massive breakers. Like you look at, just go with some of the biggest names out there. Monster Breaks is a massive break name. Backyard Breaks, even bigger. Mojo, all these huge breakers. Look at the percentage of their revenue that comes from repacks. I'm not bringing it up in a negative way. I do it, by the way, all the time. Repacks have become awesome. I think they're one of the best value plays when they're done right and actually beneficial to the customer. But think of the amount of people, the amount of money, rather, that's being spent. All those guys that I'm talking about, and even cycles down to small breakers like myself, we have to buy that stuff somewhere. So you're pumping money back. And just to preface this too, I'm not saying this like this is the end all be all. This is why breakers are so important. I don't care about that. But just the ripple effect that everything in the hobby still has because it's such a small world. You take away breakers because we still have to make our money on the allocated product. And that's what Fanatics, to me, that model may threaten, although I haven't seen it directly myself. I know some people have, and hey, it is what it is. Some people are going to get left behind. I get that too. But if you took away, just for example, repacks, the amount of money being spent on a weekly basis, the amount of liquidity being dumped back into the hobby, like I think people really underestimate where a lot of guys sell their cards. Even just a lot of people who are going to go and reinvest money back in the hobby, whether it's the PC, a card, put on the shelf, whatever you're doing with it. I think a lot of that would go away because I think guys who do the repacks, I just think it's a massive, massive part of this. And so I think that is kind of the overall point with the whole Fanatics takeover, the ground shifting, all of that is, I think the issue becomes, as you start to tweak little pieces of this ecosystem, I think you're going to see it negatively impact more people than just those directly related to it. So yeah, like you cut allocation to a bunch of shops, a bunch of breakers, they can't do what they do. Maybe that breaking page goes under. But I also think there's a lot of things that are attached to that. Now, there is definitely some good that would come from that as well. Jet Thomas says prices would become realistic then. No? Very well could, right? Like if you couldn't think about products like Flawless, Immaculate, Dynasty Baseball, how many guys are ripping Sterling Baseball? Not a lot of people ripping personals of that stuff. Is that because the price is too high? Probably, right? I think breakers have certainly negatively impacted the high pricing on wax. I don't think there's any denying that. But I also think, well, if that were the case, though, if a lot of breakers went away, I think the breakers who break that product would just break more. So I just think we've got to a point in the hobby where a lot of those products I just named are never going to come back down to earth. But does that mean that maybe stuff like Finest and Bowman's Best and Bowman, even like a Contenders Football, do those start to come down? Fantastic. If that's the case, I'm all for it. Then thin the herd, so to speak, and I'm all about it. But I do think I do think people just blindly say, hey, this group is ruining it. First of all, I always disagree and laugh at that notion. Nothing's ruined in the hobby. And if you get rid of certain elements, it will have such a big effect on everything, in my opinion. So anyways, shout out to Neo Cards and Comics, and I thought that was pretty cool. The other one real quick too was Jeremy Lee, Sports Talk Live. I should have wrote the name down. He talked about this last night, and the whole subject was about influencers. And that's another term that those of you who know me know it absolutely drives me nuts. Influencing, first of all, is I think it is the most overused, overrated term in the hobby. Was there a time when people would get on top of a microphone and yell, hey, this is a great card, go buy this, or sell this card, do that, whatever, and people would listen? I guess there was a time that happened. Although, if you go to any of the big shows, talk to anybody who's been in the hobby for more than 2 years, I've never once heard those people, myself included, I've never once heard a guy say, hey, this is a great card to buy. This guy's super undervalued. And thought to myself, I'm going to go do it. Like when I hear that, my first thought is great. It was undervalued maybe until now that somebody with a microphone is saying it. But I just don't think that is a real thing. I really don't. I know people, and I'm not trying to say that there aren't content guys out there who are in it for the wrong reasons. And I say that. I don't know people's motives. Jeff Wilson, to me, is the one who gets thrown under the bus the most with this. And this is what we had. We did a panel with him on the Mint Collective, and that was my biggest complaint. The 5 best buys, 5 times the sell. I think that is super detrimental to people. Because I think people would, at that point in time, would listen to that and go do it in the herd mentality. And by the way, Ben Burrows works for Jeff. Like I'm saying this openly because I've talked to Ben about this. Actually, Ben, that's a good comment too. People complaining about influencers trying to influence people sure is a take. I don't think it is real. I think there was a time, and like I said, Ben, I've said this to Jeff. That's why I'm not hiding behind it. I thought that was detrimental, right? You have a bunch of new people coming in, and if the landing zone, especially 2 years ago, by the way, Sports Card Investor was the landing zone for content in the hobby. There was nobody as big as Jeff, and Ben can attest to that and his whole team. But I'm also, to his credit, I'm glad they got away from that. And I don't care what you think about Jeff, don't think about Jeff. I don't care, right? Um, but that element of it, I thought was negative. Um, Gary V, by the way, buyer's remorse, another thing. So even that, like that comment though, buyer's remorse. You ever heard of Gary V? Yeah, how many of Gary V's people were in the hobby and listened to anything he said? Now, I'm not disputing the fact that some people listened to what he said and jumped in and got burned, but I don't think it was hobby people at all. I think it was his people who will follow him to his little cartoons and his doodles and all this other stupid crap he does. Not even stupid crap, by the way. But I think other people came into the space, listened to Gary's take, because you notice how outspoken Gary was in 2020. I mean, we had reached out to him for 6 months doing the podcast, nothing. First of all, then we got signed by the Ringer, and then the market got crazy hot. And all of a sudden, first message after that, Gary responded right away and came on the show. There was a reason, though, right? And even when Gary came on, everything we named, oh, yeah, buy, this is a great buy, that's a great buy, whatever. But even there, like how many hobby people? Because again, this is where I always have trouble with the distinction, right? Like guys in the hobby don't care about content anyways, and we do our own thing because we're this educated group. And I like to think I'm part of that, and I like to think we're that smart. But then at the same time, it's like, well, the biggest issue is all these people listening to these influencers. Well, I thought we were too smart for that and we didn't do it as a hobby. And again, I'm not even saying that I think Gary was negative for the hobby in general. I really do. Like I've always thought that. But to a degree, I also think, well, he brought in a bunch of new people. A lot of people came in, bought at the high, got burned, and absolutely left and took off and had a sour taste in their mouth. Yep. But I also think some of those guys came in, even if they got burned, thought, you know what? Now I'm going to put, there's a lot of people who play in major cash markets that are very competitive. And so when they get burned or lose on a deal, like a lot of guys just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to double down now and I'm going to learn the space and stay in it. So as negative as like even a Gary V was, because at the height of the market, I think he was the most outspoken, had the biggest platform. I think he was, a super hype guy. And I think it hurt a lot of people, no question. But then I think those people, the other thing too, by the way, and I subscribe to this, and Jeremy Lee mentioned on his show last night, if you buy or sell something based on what somebody tells you, I'm not really sure that I can have a whole lot of sympathy. Like the other thing I talk about openly, the market I'm in is the real estate market. Heavier, by the way, monetarily than cards. If somebody I don't know who's not established in the space is telling me, hey, this property is a good sell, this is a great property for a rental, whatever, my first question is always, well, what's the source? I don't think there was enough of that with the people who came in, but I'll be honest, I think there was more than enough of that with people in the space. A lot of the people that I've known who have collected over 3 years or longer, almost none of those guys were affected negatively by the Gary V type hype train. Because to them, it was like, well, no. And I thought this as well, by the way. Like, I'm glad you're pumping it up because some of my cars will go up. And you know what? I'll say this too. I cashed out on a ton of stuff when Gary was doing that because as soon as he talked about it, there was about a 3-month window where if Gary talked about it, it shot through the roof. And so, yeah, when things like that happen, just be smart enough to understand what it is and just sell out. Like I sold a ton of my positions in cards, even stuff I didn't think I would sell because it was getting pumped out of control. But to think that like people who were in the hobby, and again, because it's always linked to this, well, these guys ruined the hobby for us collectors, us hobbyists. Gary didn't really ruin anything for me. He came in. I thought the majority of the takes were laughable and useless. They didn't do anything for me. I didn't really have an effect on me other than I made a bunch more money than I probably would have. And I couldn't buy PC items for about 6 months to a year because I think he crazy inflated the market. Sure. But aside from that, I just think this gets blown way out of proportion, this whole influencer take. And I'll tell you right now, because of what happened the last few years, I don't think there's anybody with any microphone in this space who people would listen to, especially hobby people now, who would listen to if they said, hey, this is the next great buy, that's the next great buy, whatever. I don't think that moves the needle for anybody anymore. Because even if we weren't smart enough 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think now we probably are. So that was another take I just had that I thought was interesting. Well, I don't know if I thought it was interesting. I did. I don't know if anybody else will. The last thing, too, just briefly, I'll do a couple. We'll try to do the question and answers at the end, too, just to highlight some of the comments. Yeah, by the way, Elliot's Basement. Gary Vee is one of those guys who loves to hear himself speak, thinks what he says is intelligent, but really says nothing. That's another thing. I agree with that quite a bit, Elliot. And I'm not saying he's not intelligent. He's made hundreds of millions of dollars. Good on him. But it's also easy when you've become that status like he is, which no one in the hobby is close to that status. You can say anything, and people just take it as people who follow you will take. Like, if you were just to read off, we used to do this on the live streams all the time back in the day. We'd read like the Gary Vee inspirational quotes. It's nonsense. If any real person ever said that crap to you in real life, you would look at them and laugh. Like, what? It makes no sense. Like, you wouldn't, as long as you give 100%, 110%, you're never going to give less than 100%. Like, some of these quotes were literally just like, this isn't real. It's just a guy who's made money, so people credit him with being this all-wise. And he was. He certainly was smart enough to make money doing things. But a lot of that just gets blown out of proportion. Buyers are more significant. Influencers have pull because the blind, and I'm assuming you meant dumb, will follow almost anybody, hence Trump. Yeah, see, I don't care about the president comment. I could care less about politics. That's the part I disagree with, though. That's why, and I just don't think influencers in the hobby have real influence. Like, I think of some of the guys with the biggest space out here. Card Collector 2 has a massive YouTube following. Massive. If he were to go out and say, buy this card, I guess some people would listen and go out and buy it. But I think most people would kind of be like, well, let's proceed with, I think now the thought process is, let's proceed with caution. There's no reason to go out and make these moves, because there isn't. Like, I think this business, it's a hobby, but it's a business as well. Please don't let anybody fool you and tell you different. Like, it's ridiculous to think it's not. I think most people now are just smart to realize, hey, trends are going to happen. There's ebbs and flows. Right now, we're in a crazy down market. It doesn't mean there's not still time. I mean, I guess that's another question, too, I always have. It was horrible when things were good, and I experienced this, too, because I couldn't go out and buy the stuff I wanted. Well, now everything's at like a 2-3 year low, and it's like, well, the hobby's ruined. Well, I thought, though, that I can go out and buy my PC cards for cheap. That's why I just think there's a lot of people who speak out of both sides of their mouth, is really what it is. And it's just like every other area of life, the majority of people are not affected by any of this. The majority of people's buying and selling habits didn't change over the last 3 years. Maybe the numbers got bigger because we were making more. But in general, card shows were still card shows. People were still buying and selling boxes and ripping what they wanted to rip, and buying retail, selling retail. People were still PCing cards. Sometimes these notions that are in this little, content bubble that we live in, I say we, me and Jesse and other content creators, it's such a small portion of the real world in the hobby. The other thing, and the last thing I would say about content stuff is, I also think entertainment value is underrated. I really do. There's a lot of guys who I think put out very intelligent, articulate content. For me, and I think a lot of people think like this, though, if you don't speak in a compelling way, if you don't make interesting points, and it doesn't mean just like crazy over-the-moon hot takes and stupid stuff like that, but if there's no engagement, if there's no actual entertainment, I think a lot of people tune out to that as well. And so I think it's great that so many people try content, but I think ultimately that is one of the biggest differentiators of people having an actual following and being successful or not. I think people lose sight of that. And I think if your content is 1,000% just based on strictly cardboard, there's a very low ceiling. Like, it's a small hobby still. It really is. So there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. There's plenty of guys who make great content. I mean, we talked about other guys too. I've already named a few guys today that make great content. I like what they do. Awesome. We talk about SCR quite a bit. Like, me and Jesse agree, disagree, whatever. It's captivating content. Dan the Card Man, just because the Australian accent. That is most of why I listen to him, just to be honest. No, he's another guy, though. Does good content. Like, there's plenty of people who do good content. I know I'm leaving people off that list, but I just think every now and again I do, and I'd like to think the people I just named understand this too, but it's like we are the smallest fraction of this hobby. the views we represent, there's no one steering the ship. Like everybody does what they want in the hobby on their own. So that's it on that one. Last thing I was going to talk about real quick. We have been lagging big time on releases. Obviously, Panini was super backed up with football, basketball. We still have 2022 football coming out. We're past the 23 draft. Basketball is even further behind than that. Topps is getting ready to really. The month of July and into August is going to be unbelievably busy with baseball. I do think it's going to be interesting to see how this goes because there's so many products coming out that people will, religiously chase. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how the market goes because obviously this is a different breaking climate than we've seen in the last 3 years. The amount of people breaking who have legitimate size allocation to actually, to keep up with the demand of their room, that number shrank because people can't all get it. Like if you can't get the product and you have to buy retail, your pricing is not always competitive. So that's going to be an issue for a lot of people. But like starting Friday, Topps Finest comes out in 2 days. Next Wednesday is Tribute. 2 weeks after that is Topps Chrome. At that point, we're into August. I think you're going to see another 5 to 10 products between August and September. So this will be kind of our first test to see, is Fanatics just hitting the print button? Like, is it just, hey, we're going to just absolutely flood and make, so much product that there's no one that, there's no scarcity? Or are we going to see that be a tempered response? Like, hey, we'll make X amount of product, but we're not going to flood the market. I think based on what I know people have been able to order, it does seem like certain products, obviously there's just a ton of. But like, by the way, Mike P in the chat just said Alan McGinter pre-order just opened up another product. That's not a huge breaking product, but it's coming out the first week of August, I think. Like that's another product. So I do think it's a good thing that we're seeing stuff get back to it. We're seeing all these product releases, but it will be very interesting now to see because a lot of breakers have kind of either gone under, gone away, slowed down, whatever. There's also a lot of consolidation. TikTok, the amount of people there is way smaller that are allowed to break. On eBay, they're way smaller. Fanatics Live just announced that they're going to have a live event of some kind, and they're going to be showcasing Fanatics Live this weekend at the All-Star game, the All-Star event, All-Star weekend, whatever it is in Seattle. So I think you're going to start seeing less avenues to buy product, even though for the next 8 to 12 weeks, we're going to see more product release from Topps specifically than anybody else, than any other time we've seen recently. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see what the market does. We also got super spoiled, by the way, with 2022 rookies. I'm glad because 22 was unbelievable, especially at the time. J-Rod and Wander, transcendent type talents. But Witt, Torkelson, Suzuki got hot for a while. Just a bunch of guys last year were really, really hot. But this year's is actually, I think that's going to be the one saving grace to a lot of this product. I've always said it. To me, Finest is one of the best ROI on average, best value breaks you can get into. PYTs of Finest to me, and again, just because I don't want someone clipping this, he's a breaker pumping it. We got 15 cases between me and Eddie. We're going to break every single one of them. It's sub $2,000. The checklist is very balanced, and there's a ton of big rookies. Adley, Gunnar, Michael Harris, Nolan Gorman, Riley Green, Yoshida, the kid for the Sox, has his first pro uniform auto in that. So I think what you're going to see is people just get really selective because there's going to be so many products that come out. I think it's going to be a real time for people to say, you know what? And Topps Chrome's the other one. Topps Chrome, by the way, I got to double check this because I didn't check this thoroughly enough. I believe the checklist this year is smaller than it's been the past few. And the rookies are, in my opinion, it's a deeper rookie class. It obviously doesn't have the top, top high-end guys, but same rookie class, same checklist as Finest. There is a different format. There's Hobby and Jumbo, like always, but that's a switch this year. So Hobby used to be 2 autos. Jumbo was 5. This year it's 1 and 3. But now there's this product called Topps Chrome Breaker's Delight, which I'm guessing is like Topps Chrome HTA. It may just be autos. I don't know. And then Tribute in between those two releases. But I think that's what you're going to start to see. I think the Hobby is just going to say, hey, we can't afford 3-4 weeks in a row of big product. So I like Finest. I'm going to spend heavy here. And then I'm going to take Tribute off. Or I like Tribute. I like the high-end chase. I'll probably lay low on Finest and chill out on Topps Chrome. But I do think that's a good thing. Min, by the way, this is such a – I heard they said there's no relief pitchers in Chrome. That has been the MO, and it has been true, by the way. That's why I was glad to see they cut down the list some, because I don't want 5 autos if 4 of them are pitchers with 9 ERAs who throw 2 innings a year. It used to be brutal. Like, that has forever been that way. Steven, Tops won't sell the breakers, but as a breakers product. So, Steven, that's not true. Plenty of guys have direct accounts with Tops and Fanatics. They sell directly to breakers still. So that's not real. Plenty of us still get product direct from them. And so that's about it. Those are kind of the topics I wanted. But I've become, and I hate to use the term bullish, but man, I do think right now, and I'll end with this, and I'll take if there's questions or whatever comments, we'll just highlight a few as we go. I think it might be one of the best upcoming times to buy that we've seen in a while. I think, again, if you're looking for PC stuff, cool. Like, everybody under the sun has said this, and it's true. The market is super down right now. Great. Go buy the stuff you want. And then obviously, if you're looking to buy and flip right now, I think you can find plenty of deals more readily available now than they've been in a while. So I do think it's a good thing. So, like I said, let me hit a couple comments before we jump off. The buyer's remorse. This hobby is all hype driven. If people smarten up, modern is bleak. Yes and no. I mean, yes and no. Hype helps. But again, you got guys like Adley and Gunnar who play really well. Ellie De La Cruz playing really well. There's hype, but there's also on field, on court, whatever the sport is. The on-field stuff still helps drive markets, which is great. But you're right about hype. I mean, look at what's happening in the NBA. Porzingis stuff and Bradley Beal stuff is out of control right now compared to where it was. With Beal, I understand it. He's a borderline superstar, in my opinion, and he's going to a contending team. But before he's even stepped foot on the court in Phoenix, pricing is through the roof. 2-3x across the board, just about. That almost makes sense because I think most people think realistically Beal's going to score and that team's going to compete. But like Porzingis, when has he ever played a full season? When has he ever contributed to a winning basketball team? I'm a Celtics fan. I hope he does. I hope Porzingis is unbelievable. But it's never happened. We've never seen him consistently be healthy and play at a high level. Until I see that. So the fact that his pricing went through the roof, part of me thinks, well, it's good. Like, at least things are happening. And so we're seeing good results from it. But the other part of me is like, man, guys, just temper it, just temper it some, I guess. And Rick, you bring up, a good point. In fairness, Porzingis had the best season of his career last year. He did, but he played 65 games for the Wizards. So even that, the last year he figured out the health portion, but there was no contributing to a winning team. They weren't winning. They didn't make the play. And I know they were almost a play-in team at the end of the season. So again, like Porzingis and stuff, those things drive me crazy. There's some good examples of the flip side of that, though, in baseball. Like, look at the season Ronald Acuna's having. I know the whole market's come down, but the fact that people haven't seen how historically unbelievable he has been, that's amazing to me. The first half of the season, unbelievable. Young kid, power, 5-tool player, ridiculous. And it's like, man, it's almost like he's so safe. We know what he can do. There's no speculation that he could be 10x what he is now as a player, because he can't be. He's not going to get much better because he's unbelievable. So I do think that is funny that his market is a little bit has been a little more stagnant than it's been. Rob White, what about Dame? I think Dame is the perfect example of both of those worlds colliding, hype and actual performance. I took some crap for the last statement I made on the pod, and it was, I think he has a super low floor. And then people shot back, well, he had a great year, statistically highest point per game average, all this crap. I don't care about that. I don't care if he averages 3 points less this year. If he plays in Boston or in Miami, those two particular, because going to Brooklyn does nothing. But if he plays in one of those two markets that are already championship contending, then it's going to be this unbelievable hype around a guy who's going to this great place. And also, wait till he gets on the court and he lives up to the hype. So I think the Dame market could absolutely explode just because I think he is that good. And again, and you can't do this lightly, so that's why we're not talking legacy. But in terms of talent and on-court ability, he is the closest comp to Steph Curry we've ever seen. Like, you put Dame on those teams, they probably win a bunch of championships as well. And that's not to take away from Curry, because there's no question Curry's arguably a top 10 player all time. Dame is nowhere near that. You got to have rings in the NBA. But that's a realistic thing. If he can get a ring or two, all of a sudden his whole view just type of changes. Pickled pretzels. I don't know anything about soccer. I hate to say it, man. I am totally clueless. So I'm not going to waste your time with me giving a useless answer. Ohtani has more home runs now than Judge did this time last year. Ohtani's a freak. There's a good chance we never see anybody like him ever again because, I mean, we've never seen it before. Absolutely ridiculous. Benny B. Dame he does. So Ben brings up a good point. A 2012 rookie, so there's not a ton of huge high-end stuff, but look at some of his crazy low pop, like under 200 pop stuff that's going for a few $100. I think Dame has a crazy high ceiling. I'm not saying rush out and buy him. To me, I'm still going to wait till just the thick of the offseason. But I think Dame could be really, really good. And he's already really good. I think his market could really explode if he goes somewhere and is competitive. Elliot, I know you hated AC last year. That is an understatement. AC was garbage. But you in sports, but keep your head on a swivel in Chicago this year. Crimes been an all time. I would take Chicago. I've been there 20 times any day of the week. AC, I'll never go to again. Buyer's remorse. The shine's worn off of Acuna. People weren't interested in the kid who just got drafted. That's kind of to my point, right? Like people will see Drew Jones. Man, he could be the next Griffey. But then we'll look at Acuna and you could realistically say he's already playing like the next Griffey. Oh, so he can't go up. He can't 10x. Let me chase the guy who maybe could. Sure, that kind of ties into your hype thing. There's definitely some validity there, no question. Rob White, Miami with Jimmy not needing the ball could be interesting. That's why Miami, not Boston. Selfishly, I would love to see Dame in Boston, and I would get rid of Jaylen Brown, Brogdon, Picks, whatever in a heartbeat. If you could keep Tatum, Dame, and Robert Williams, build whoever you want around those three. But Miami, to me, is much more interesting. And they talk about this, Stephen A. Jimmy doesn't need the ball. Nobody on that team needs – you got a bunch of shooters who spread the floor. Bam, who is just as happy hanging out in the paint doing nothing but being effective. And then Jimmy was going to just take off 82 games anyways. Like Miami is totally content to go in as the 8th seed. They don't care. I think him going to Miami would be absolutely unbelievable, but you got to keep those three. If they're going to do it, it's got to be him, Jimmy, and Bam. You got to keep the three together. So if Dame goes to Miami, it's because of they would need a third team. Yep. Rick, which always makes it tough, which I hate, but I would love. I just want to see him go somewhere and actually compete. So talk national, what to expect and look out for. So Rico, we're going to do that on the next either tomorrow's pod or next Monday. We're going to do like a ramp up to the national. So we'll do that on. By the way, guys, Sports Cards Nonsense is the name of the podcast. Make sure you check that out. We talk at length about all that stuff. Love when people are too scared to go to cities, give advice about cities. I've been to the cities. I just hate them. I've been to Atlantic City. I'm not scared to go there. I just, at this point in my life, why would I want to? I mean, I'm happy in Nashville. Do the Pelicans make any moves this offseason? I'll tell you what, Rico, and it's such a what if, but what if Zion stays healthy with that roster? That team would actually be really, really good. But he is obviously more interested in McDonald's than anything on the court. So, yeah, kind of a shame. What, if any, will the effect be on the hobby from the Netflix show King of Collectibles? I mean, it's been out for a few months. I don't think we've seen anything. Golden sales are still down on some big cards. Not a knock on Golden, just the way the market is. So, Alan, I don't think there's any effect. I guess some people have taken note of the market now that maybe didn't, but yeah. Rick Thomas, I think Utah and New Orleans are teams to watch. I tell you, if you could find a way to put him in New Orleans, I guess my only fear with both of those, though, is there's no number two. There's no legit number two with either one of those teams. Not proven. I know that Markkanen had a great season. There's a lot of good things, but none of those teams to me are competing for a championship. So, Jesse, here's sports, but did you see Cubs top prospect? No, he's not. Is that real, Jesse? Pete Crow Armstrong? He was a stud coming up for the Mets. He's with the Cubbies now. It was a Javi Baez trade, I think. Is he really coming on the pod? We'll see if he has anything interesting to say. I didn't know that. Look at Jesse breaking news. Personally looking forward to pricing for CSG and Out There combined and what rates will be for non-members. I have no interest in CSG. We are, again, transparency, all this other, because people will whine about it. We are sponsored by SGC. To me, it's SGC and PSA. Until I can find anything else reasonable, I can't do it. In regards to the podcast, was Jesse born on third base or did he hit a triple? Jesse wouldn't know what a triple is if it hit him in the face. So, any appetite to check out sports cards from international markets that aren't mainstream U.S. sports? So, Jonathan, there is not for me personally, but clearly there is. Like, there's a major market for those things, and it's only going to continue to grow as product gets more accessible across the globe. So, I think there's obviously a huge demand for that. I'm just boring, by the way. And I know most collectors are more diverse than me. I'm just very boring with what I like. What I like. I'm just very traditional with what I collect. We'll work that into some of these videos too going forward. Some will be just me losing my mind and ranting. We'll have some guests coming on. Dan the Cardman's coming on in a couple weeks. We scheduled that 2 weeks from today. Jesse will join one of these days too. Like I said, we're going to reach out to some guests. If there's people I actually want to talk to, some people I just don't have interest in, and not a knock on them, just don't want to. But if there's a guest that I think is interesting and add something different, I'd be all about it. So some friendly advice to you: if you're knowledgeable and honest, people will watch. I couldn't disagree with that more, quite frankly. I think if you are loud and obnoxious and just, and again, hats off to people. I don't care if you do it, but I don't. How many people do you know that are just knowledgeable and honest? I think it's all about entertainment value, always. I think that is the biggest draw to anybody, whether it's a podcast, a YouTube show. And that's why, like this, I hope this grows a little bit. We're never going to put a ton of time and effort into this. YouTube is not for me. I don't like being on camera, so I don't look at the camera because I just can't concentrate. I'm not good with the graphics and all that different stuff. I think the people who do that, though, the channels that do that effectively, kill it. Like, it's great for people to do it. That's why, to me, though, you put me in a studio with no cameras and just a microphone, me and Jesse, we can entertain there. To do that over here on camera, I think is just a totally different animal. So I just don't know that will ever be, but I mean, knowledgeable. We try to be very honest. I think I'm as knowledgeable in most areas of the hobby as most people. So we will try to continue that, obviously, going forward. But yeah, like I said, that's kind of the premise of the show, though. It's just kind of an extension and trying to get into the video world to expand this thing out. And who knows, if it starts to pick up a little bit of steam, we'll put more time and effort into it. For now, I'm going to do 1 or 2 of these a week and just kind of mess around. Like I said, we'll add some guests. We may rip some product here once in a while. I don't know. I don't really like that either, though, because that gets a little boring to me. But we'll see. So there you go. Episode 2, GIO Talks. That is me. First time on StreamYard. Jesse? 1 to 10, I'm giving myself a 6.1. Felt very good about it. I had to call him to get this thing started. So there you go. Podcast comes out tomorrow. Sports cards and nonsense. You can get anywhere you listen to podcasts. And Jesse told me what to say here. Don't hit the like button. Smash the like button. And then crush the subscribe button, whatever stupid thing you're supposed to do. So there you go. Guys, thanks for hanging out. I will see you. Actually, I'm jumping live on Card Shop Live right now. We got 2 breaks that just filled. So see you guys over there if you're there. If not, we'll hear you, or you'll hear us tomorrow on the podcast. Later.